to you, Stephen, to introduce our next presenter.
Yeah, I believe we're ready to go with the next gentleman. And my gosh, what an honor, what a pleasure, what a rare treat even to have Paul Stamets with us. He is really one of those people that barely needs an introduction these days. Paul has a footprint internationally around the world these days with his work with medicinal mushrooms, edible mushrooms, mushrooms that can save the world, psychedelic mushrooms, and a whole bunch of initiatives that he's been engaged in, innovative discoveries. He's really a great blessing to the planet. I'm not going to go on about it because many people know him, and there's a bio on our website, and you can find a great amount of information online about Paul. But we are truly honored and delighted to have Paul Stamets with us. So welcome, Paul.
Honored to be here. Good to see you again.
It's all yours.
Okay. Well, here we are. October 24th, we're in prime mushroom season. For those of you in British Columbia, Washington, and Oregon, Western regions, that is. This is a time that psilocybin mushrooms are coming up in massive quantities. Liberty caps, psilocybin similanceta, wavy caps, psilocybin similanceta, Baeocystis is more rare. Pelliculosa is growing along trails, along the old growth forest. It's interesting, that's the only species I know that truly grows in an old growth forest environment or undisturbed habitat. Almost all the psilocybes are trail followers and following humans. And on trails, mushrooms oftentimes form more frequently, and there's lots of speculation as to that. Could be exposure to more light, could be compacted ground where it collects more water. These are interface runners. These are edge runners, and these are species in general, the psilocybin species. There's over 216 species in the genus Psilocybe. 116 of those 216 species are known to be psilocybin active. There's about 20 or so other species in other genera, Genoplus, Anosabe, Pineolus, or Copelandia. So what's interesting about the psilocybin mushrooms, they're circumpolar. They're all over the world. And they're also have been used by indigenous peoples all over the world. So rather than being ethnocentrically tied to the Amazon or to the Peyote peoples of the desert regions of the Southeast, North America, psilocybin mushrooms have been used, by Russians, by people in Ireland and Germany, and of course, in America we know very well, and in North America. So I see these as, sacraments that have been enjoyed by many people. So there's not an ethnocentric. There are ethnocentric poles of knowledge, sure, in a cultural context, but there's so many of these islands of knowledge using psilocybin mushroom species around the world that I think there's a unanimity of common experiences, and it's a consciousness bridge, you might say, connecting cultures together because they've had these shared experiences that they can relate to. So I'm going to give a presentation, and it's a never-ending story. We have some extraordinarily exciting research that I can touch upon. We are currently very active in the COVID pandemic. We're also very active in anti-neuroinflammatories. So we're quite excited about neurogenesis, the ability of psilocybin mushrooms, psilocybin analogs, which are present in the natural form. And so my theme here is people medicine versus profit medicine. What I mean by that is people medicine is the use of magic mushrooms in natural form. And medicine, for most part, is localized in a pure pharmaceutical application. So it's kind of big pharma, can move into the consciousness, plant spirit medicine world, versus people who've been using these substances in their natural form for thousands of years. And no matter what happens with the pharmaceutical approval of psilocybin or psilocin in its pure form, 95 to 99% of people will still be using magic mushrooms. opting for the natural form as opposed to wanting to, be clinically prescribed by psilocybin and going into a hospital environment, which I can fully understand for those people who are uncertain, nervous, who already have anxiety about changing their consciousness. They want to be shepherded through a safe environment. But the ecosystem of a hospital is not the ecosystem of nature. And the big messages so many of us get is that we're all connected. We're all connected with the natural universe. And yes, you get a glimpse to that little portal, in a hospital room with doctors and nurses and, highly controlled, environment, but it's not the same thing as being on the expansiousness. And my first psychedelic trip was on the cliffs of Big Sur. And it was great because I tripped with my older brother, Bill's best friend, my older brother, John's best friend. We all, we actually got LSD from Stephen Still's dealer. I'm not sure I should say that or not, but I think the statute of limitations has expired. And we went on these bluffs of Big Sur, and I remember, scooting out on a little triangle ledge and peaking on LSD, and the ocean was coming up, and the waves, and then the expanse of the horizon, and then I realized I couldn't turn around. I was getting vertigo, and if I tried to turn around on this laser edge, I'd fall several hundred feet, down the side. So I was transfixed. I resigned myself to enjoy the experience, and it was very, very powerful for me. It connected me with my brothers and very part of my existence. So I'm going to jump into my PowerPoint. I have about 25, 30 slides, and so I will now, let's see, I'll try to share screen here if I'm not a Luddite. And I am a Luddite, so we can ascertain that right now. You can see my entire, for some reason, I'm not dyslexic, but I do everything backwards. So all my file folders are Z to A. Still haven't figured that out. Okay, so psilocybin mushrooms are medicinal, the case for people medicine versus profit medicine. I'm going to rename this conference, and thank you, Dennis. This is the Spirit, Plant, and Mushroom Medicine Conference. I presume you can see this. Okay. I think I would say that is a yes, presumably. So I want to show 3 slides because I think this is impactful. And thanks very much to my friend Mark Hayden from MAPS Canada, who first showed me one of these slides, and we've modified it a few times. These are institutions, universities currently engaged in clinical studies on psilocybin, other psychedelics. And then Dr. Pam Prisco and I then started looking at, well, what are the institutions doing psilocybin research currently in North America on psilocybin? And it's a who's who of the most prestigious academic institutions in North America. And moreover, in Europe, there's a large movement. Now, what this basically means is a chorus of commonality of opinion. In order for these to be approved by the respective governmental agencies, like the FDA, it have to be, number one, they have to have addressed a medical issue that's currently not being adequately addressed by other medicines already approved. So there has to be a need. There has to be safety, which is really important. And of course, it has to be available. So if you scale up a drug that's incredibly expensive, that is unaffordable, then of course it does not have societal benefit that would otherwise have. So I want to show a short thing from TheraPsil. So TheraPsil is a movement up here in British Columbia in particular that is getting the Canadian government to allow psilocybin for end-of-life patients. And this is from TheraPsil's efforts here. So big shout out to TheraPsil and their team. And this is Lori's story. So this is a short 3 to 4 minute video.
It's very difficult to wrap your head around. I'm dying. The chances are that I'm not going to be around in a couple of years. I heard about a network in Vancouver of therapists who are treating patients with psilocybin patients with anxiety and who are dealing with life and death issues. And I thought that really sounds interesting to me, and there's no danger. I'm there with two other people in the room, and so it's something it's worth trying, because I need to be able to enjoy my life. And all of a sudden, everything was light and beautiful and warm, and I felt just this rush of warmth and love and just peace come over me as the lights came up. I'm so fortunate that I had those connections, that I heard about this network of therapists that are willing to risk their licenses to treat people with this drug that's not, and I think it's so wrong that people don't have access to this, because people are in pain and dying, and or PTSD or depression, and which studies show psilocybin helps all of those things. And why are we not allowing people to have this drug? We allow them to have other drugs that are so harmful. We have given people to die, and I think that's great. I don't know if I'll be brave enough to choose the option if the time comes. But it's there for people if they need it. But what about living? What do we do in between that part, in the process of dying? It's a long process sometimes. So how are we going to help through it? Do we want people to be living with the anxiety and fear? Or do we want to provide them a way to be able to deal with things that need to be dealt with in their life that are painful and hard, but also to be able to experience the love and joy and peace that this has provided to me and to other people that I've talked to. This trip actually changed everything for me, because now I'm able to live each day just with peace and joy and love every day, and not have this thing weighing on me. I feel so much healthier and lighter in a way, even though I have this thing inside me that could kill me. But like I said, today I'm not gonna die. I'm good. And that's all any of us have.
So, and then I want to follow this up with a short 1-minute video that I had also for TheraSoul. And, you know, could never come close to what Lori's message is, but it's a message that we all share. We all have to face our own mortality.
There's two things in life. We are born, we die. Where do we come from? Where are we going? With a psilocybin mushroom experience, you suddenly know that you're part of a giant oneness. And it gives you context and consolation about your own mortality. So I think it's critically important that at the end of your life, you have a right to these substances. Who dares say that you do not? When these have been used for thousands, probably tens of thousands, maybe millions of years, and laws have been created to ostracize people to use them only in the past 50 years. I mean, it's not only academically naive, immoral. And I think everyone has a right to how they're going to leave this life.
A big shout out to the brave people of the TheraSoul movement and all those other people trying to get access to these sacred medicines. So I'm going to go through a series of slides here because there are some other mushrooms that have been used for fighting anxiety and depression. And one of them is very well known as a lion's mane mushroom. It's an edible and choice mushroom grown first, as far as I know, in Japan and elsewhere in Asia. It is a mushroom that's commonly available. There's another mushroom growing in the woods of the Northwest that is called Hericium colloides, bear's head, similar. But this is important that you know is that the nerve growth factors that are found in lion's mane is found in the mycelium. And in fact, with both Hericium arenaceus, lion's mane, and Hericium colloides, the fruit body extract actually reduce neurogenesis, nerve growth below baseline, below normal. It is the mycelium that contains these arenaceans and other compounds that are extremely good at igniting nerve regrowth. And so it's very interesting. The two sides of the same coin, fruit body mushroom extracts actually limit neurogenesis, statistically significantly so. And I populated a website called mushroomreferences.com. It's unbranded just for scientists and physicians. You can look up these references there, some with literally hundreds of peer-reviewed references, the abstract of which, because of course by copyright, I can't list the entire articles, but that's a good resource if you want to look up the active Hericium colloides is suggested for fighting glioblastoma, which our good friend Terence McKenna died from, Dennis's brother. And had we known this, that the bodies would have slowed glioblastoma, maybe Terence would be with us today. So glioblastoma is uncontrolled brain cancer. And it's so there's an example that maybe the fruit body extracts could be medically significant for glioblastoma. But for the rest of us, you know, because of dementia and the progression to neurodegeneration over time, we need to look at the mycelial properties here for the best benefit. So there's been 4 clinical studies so far on lion's mane. Significant increase in cognitive function compared to the placebo group, 8, 12, and 16 weeks. More recently, there is a lion's mane study for helping combat decline with Alzheimer's patients. It's a 49-week study, almost a year. This was a double-blind, placebo-controlled experiment using mycelium grown on grain, and showed significant increase in cognitive function and lowering the degenerative process associated with Alzheimer's patients. We are currently involved in now almost a year and a half in another clinical study in the Bay Area using lion's mane mycelium. And we are seeing also similar results, even in many ways more powerful. So when this 2-year study is completed, then we look forward to be publishing those results. So, you know, it's not like we invented this. We're just basically reaffirming what other scientists, especially in Asia, have already determined. So Alzheimer's and in post-mortem patients upon their brains, there's oftentimes the occurrence of amyloid plaques and demyelination, the erosion of the sheath on the axons that are conductive for the nerve signaling. And so the amyloid plaques co-occur with demyelination are clearly seen. They've been seen here. And so now, in this case, the question is, are the amyloid plaques an artifact? You know, these can be picked up now in blood tests, but the association of amyloid formation is coincident with the Alzheimer's. With lion's mane, we see remyelination and a destruction of these amyloid plaques as the myelin sheath regrows on the axon nerve. So that's very exciting. This has been clearly proven now. So lion's mane mycelium, again, not the fruit body extracts. They will set you back in terms of your neurological neuroregeneration. I started doing some experiments, and here's one of them, confirmed also what we read in the scientific literature. On the far right blue is lion's mane fruit bodies. The purple is lion's mane mycelium, and then BDNF, brain-derived nerve growth factors. And this is from a company in France called NeuroFit, use pluripotent stem cells. And there's the control, as one would expect. It has no effect on the outgrowth of neurites. The BDNF is the kind of the gold standard, and the lion's mane mycelium increased it, in this case, about 8% over baseline, and the fruit bodies decreased it by about 11%. Now, this is over 7 days, so this is in a fairly short period of time. You're seeing benefit from the lion's mane mycelium. This is on a sextuplet. We have done this now experiment, I think, 6 times, so this is not a one-off experiment. We've gotten consistent results. And then we started stacking with not only lion's mane, but psilocybin mushroom analogs. These are basically, these three are baeocystin, and norpsilocin. These are legal analogs that are involved in the production of psilocybin and psilocin. Baeocystin degrades into norpsilocin. These are not consciousness changing. I've personally bioassayed baeocystin on 2 occasions, and it is not active. It does not change. Doesn't get me high. I was disappointed. I thought it would. I was ready for liftoff, and it didn't occur. And I think I'm the first one in the literature. Johan Gartz also has one report. I'd like to talk to Johan about that. I did it at 10 and milligrams. But so baeocystin, norbaeocystin, norpsilocin is psi X, Y, and Z. Now, in this case, we repeated the experiment. Lion's mane before was 108%. Now this time it's 111%. Well, that's in the normal range of variance. BDNF in this time was even more potent. So we looked at basically the neurogenic effects in 7 days again, sextuplet, to see what the benefits would be. Well, of course, lion's mane, we know there's clinical studies on it. Where are the clinical studies on psilocybin and neurogenesis with humans? There are. There right now, Johns Hopkins, they've recruited patients who are studying psilocybin to fight Alzheimer's. So there is a medical justification path forward for looking for psilocybin for fighting Alzheimer's because of neurogenic properties. Just more recently, we know that psilocybin and psilocin has anti-inflammatory as a anti-inflammatory. So this is big news. These psychedelics can be anti-inflammatories with the nervous system. So we did a stacking, and we found something quite surprising. Is the norpsilocin, which only gave a 7% liftoff over baseline. Now this time, the lion's mane before was 8% to 12%. Now it's 114.8, about 15. So it is, again, we know that the stimulation of the lion's mane mycelium on neurite outgrowth is, is well replicated here. But the norpsilocin did not do much. But when we stack lion's mane mycelium and norpsilocin together, the theoretical additive effect, if they were acting on different receptors, would be 114.8, 107.7. Yeah, those together about 122.5. But that would be a theoretical additive effect if they're activating different sites that are responsible for neurogenesis. We got synergy. We got the entourage effect. What actually the stacking of the two increased by neurons regrowth over 36%. This is unexpected. This speaks to something I think is a larger issue, that the advantage of psilocybin mushrooms, because of the other compounds in them besides psilocybin and psilocin, could benefit you neurologically. And so we're doing research right now with Rudy Tanz at Harvard Medical School and with lion's mane, and he has also found very, very extraordinarily powerful anti-neuroinflammatory properties. Our research with him and his group is quite robust right now and very exciting. We plan on publishing some papers in the not too distant future with Harvard Medical School, because the results in his famous quote is that they drop the cytokines like flies. I love that scientific description. So thank you, Rudy, for your support on this. So I have come up with a well-known nootropic vitamin complex, the Stamets formula for epigenetic neurogenesis. And calculating that psilocybin content is about 1% in Psilocybin cubensis. It's usually around 0.8% when it's dried down. And so we're using about 1/10 of a gram, with 1 gram being liftoff. Most people feel enough at 1 gram of Psilocybin cubensis drug weight. 5 grams is what Terence described as a hero's journey. Many of us know that. So we're using 1/10 of a liftoff dose. The idea is, the definition of a microdose is you don't feel it. It's subsensorium, below the level of you being able to sense it. So then we stack it with the lion's mane mushrooms or the aranacines. Again, we're finding the mycelium have more than just aranacines in it. Part of our new paper, separate from Harvard Medical School publication that we're pursuing, we have another paper coming out talking about the other compounds in the mode of action in upregulating genes that are responsible for neurogenesis. So that's very exciting. And we attack it with niacin. Now, niacin is really important for multiple reasons. And I have asked no less than 6 conferences. Those of us who are, I guess we call ourselves elders now, but in the 60s and 70s, it was well thought, well known that it was rumored that if you stack niacin, if you had a bad LSD or a mushroom, if you took a whole bunch of niacin, it would bring you down. And so it was to suppress the activity of psilocybin and LSD. Now, many people had heard about this. And this is also important because unfortunately, several of the clinical studies have used niacin as the positive placebo control. Now, you are not supposed to use a control that has any association historically with the drug that you're testing. That's kind of a violation of basic scientific protocol, but the researchers know about this. They were not embedded in that psychedelic community, as I was and my friends. So, but I use niacin because of 4 reasons. One, of course, is the niacin flush. We stack this and we have basically 1/10 of a gram of psilocybin mushrooms. You have 50 to 100 grams of niacin, vitamin B3, nicotinic acid. If you had to take 10 times or 10 pills, you would get a full gram of vitamin B3. And those of you who've had the hot flush, the flushing from vitamin B3, you know what it is. Very uncomfortable. You want to take off your clothes, you're itching, you flush red. It's it excites the nerves. Well, that's the other reason. We want to excite the nerves and we want to drive the neurogenic benefits of these compounds to the endpoint of the peripheral nervous system. With the idea that neuropathies oftentimes present themselves at the ending of the fingertips and the toes. It's also a vasodilator. Well, that's a third reason. So by having greater vasodilation, if the vascular system is intact, when a person is experiencing neuropathies, and you can get these neurogenic agents there to the endpoints, and you have them dilated vessels, so you have more blood flow, you can more delivery. And the fourth one is, we know that there's neurodegeneration in association with niacin deficiencies. So there's 4 reasons here that are counterintuitive to many to stack niacin with psilocybin mushrooms. Now, a shout out to people in British Columbia. I have had to send 6 cease and desist letters to these startup companies who are selling this stack using my name on the bottle. It's not so much they're taking my formula, it's a patent pending formula, but to have my name on the bottle without even asking me to make profits for themselves, this is trespassing, and the phrase is, I think plagiarism is the worst form of flattery. But I mean, it's just not ethical, folks, to put somebody's name on the top of a bottle, hide behind the veils of anonymity, except for your website, to make profits. So this is also a concern to me because I don't, want to be crossing the border and having the border agents say, oh, you're involved in the illegaling of psilocybin mushrooms. And anyhow, we take this very seriously. And so I'm just a shout out there, please, people don't use my name. It's just not right. So, but there's 2 protocols. There's the Fadiman protocol and the Stamets protocol. Both of them have the same concept in mind. The idea of pulsing is that you take it and then you have a few days off, you wash those receptors, or you normalize. We want the endogenous systems to still be intact for innate neurogenesis. And then you stimulate those receptors again, with the psilocybin mushrooms or psilocybin. So Jim and I go back and forth. We will refine this over time based on the best evidence clinically that is given. Now, Jim recommends 0.4 grams. I get liftoff at 0.4 grams. I can feel it. Depending upon the potency of the mushrooms, of course. But I'm at 0.1 grams or less. And again, it's the subsensorial effect. It's below the ability of being able to sense something. So if you take it and you feel it, it's not a microdose. So you want to be below that. You want to be able to drive, to operate. You want to be able to function without any intoxication that is noticeable. So with Ismail and Kayland of Quantified Citizen, Dr. Pam Crisco, myself, Zach Walsh, have put together this microdose.me app. It's available for iOS or iPhones primarily, and iPads. And a very effective little program for measuring the effects of microdosing. And so the microdosing effects, first it's anonymized, it's gone through ethical reviews, it's encrypted, and then you talk about what you're microdosing with, how much you're taking, and then it has whether it's prepaid, a blotter, whether you're stacking it with chocolate, with lion's mane, and then you have a memory test. Watch the flowers light up, and then you have to repeat, and you get a score. And you can then do with hearing. You can also do this with sight. There is a tap test for the rapidity of being able to tap your fingers, which is used oftentimes with Parkinson's diagnostics. So this is exciting because we announced this on Joe Rogan, and we had over 12,000 people subscribe. So we have three categories of microdosing: the low dose, which is what I'm a proponent of, 0.1 grams of psilocybin cubensis dried weight. The medium dose is 72% of the respondents were in that range. The high dose is percent, the least number. So I'm happy to share this data. And we have an article in preparation that we will be soon submitting for publication. Now, this is extraordinary. There's 8,700 people baseline microdosers, and the vast majority of them are psilocybin users, almost 3,500. But there's also non-microdosers, people who are not taking psilocybin, LSD, or other substances. And this is the preliminary data that we have. This is a depression, anxiety, and stress scale. In terms of depression, the non-microdosers are basically not changing for a month period of time. The people who are microdosing, high significance, less than 0.001. Also with anxiety, depression and anxiety can co-occur as well with mood. So high statistical significance here of microdosers being able to beat their depression. There's one well-known company right now that's got a drug approved, psilocybin as approved treatment-resistant depression. Another group from Wisconsin is just going for general depression using pure psilocybin. This is the first evidence, and this is a large data set. This is not a set of 24 patients, for instance. These are large data sets using with hundreds at times of people. Well, with mood, this is where we find even greater significance. Tremendous increase in positive mood versus negative mood with microdosing. So now this is extraordinary for multiple reasons. Given confounders, given the fact that the variability and the dosage that people are taking, 0.1 to 0.4 grams, given the variability of individual sensitivity, some people are highly sensitive and some people are not. Many of us know people are non-responders. They can take 4 or 5 grams of cubensis, have no effect. Given the variability of the content of psilocybin and psilocin in these mushrooms, think of that. There's a wide range of variability. Even with those three confounders, and there's no doubt more, we still have signal above the noise. So as we narrow these fields into more specialized subsets, the significance value should increase even more. Now, this is extraordinary, folks. And it probably is related to the entourage effect of these psilocybin analogs that are also improving the neurological health of the patients. When you have, better neurological health, when you're happier, you're more creative. When you're more creative, you're happier. As a result, you're less depressed, you're less anxious, you are in bad mood. So I think these things compound together, and we see the entourage effect already with lion's mane and the psilocybin analogs. So I think these other analogs, and this is what we're involved in now, in research and stacking baeocystin, norbaeocystin, norpsilocin, and seeing if we can see the entourage effect by stacking those individual molecules together. Now, we did also deal with lion's mane, and, in a sense, the good news is that it doesn't counteract the benefits that we've already seen with microdosing just with psilocybin mushrooms. But moreover, all the clinical studies with lion's mane mushrooms go out for many more weeks than just 4 weeks. So the neurological benefits that we would expect to see for long-term resolution of neuropathies would occur after many, many cell divisions. And so when you take a high dose of psilocybin, how many cell divisions do your neurons have in 6 hours? And the residual. But you take microdosing over a long period of time, the neurological impact and benefits from cell divisions will obviously be compounded over time, and we're likely to see better data. So this is not, the stack is not proven. This is, make this very clear. It's a hypothetical, but I have very good evidence preliminarily, and more that I will show in the future that justifies this combination of compounds. So I'll just skip. No, let me just come to a quick conclusion here. There's advantages of psilocybin mushrooms over pharmaceutical grade of psilocybin and psilocin. Well, the advantages of psilocybin mushrooms are widely available now. You can't get pure psilocybin. They're affordable. We don't know what the expense of psilocybin therapy is going to be. Many of us have heard it's $5,000 to $20,000 for a session. Medical insurance may pay for it, but it's outside the reach of most people who are most in need. And psilocybin mushrooms are not controlled by the pharmaceutical industry. They can be grown at home, well-established long cultural use over many cultures, the entourage effect, which I mentioned, and there's a great appeal to the natural form. The disadvantages are obviously the opposite. And it's controlled by pharmaceutical companies, but funding investors are primarily driven by profit. They want to make money on this. Whereas people wanting to consume psilocybin mushrooms are trying to self-treat. They're not into, they're into it for their own personal health reason. They're not motivated by profit. Well, there are disadvantages of psilocybin mushrooms. Variability in psilocybin and psilocin content is extraordinary. The psilocybin and psilocin plummets over time. There's contamination due to molds and bacteria. This is really important, folks. There's no GMP standards. There's no accountability. You get sick, who do you go to? And there's lack of confidence for the wary consumers who are suspicious because of these problems. Well, the advantage of the pharmaceutical industry is there is quality control, CGMP, the content's guaranteed, the impurities are minimized. It is controlled by pharmaceutical companies, so you do know where to go to. And the consumer's confidence of a measured amount of a pure molecule. So these are important issues to look at. So I want to bring this slide to your attention. This is really important. And so few people understand this, is that psilocybin mushrooms grow very, very quickly. And the young ones you see in the foreground and the center photograph to the ones that mature in the background could be 8 hours difference in growth. So the ones on the left in this kind of the drumstick stage, where the veils are closed, are super high quality. Now I go to Burn, I'm very careful. I never accept and touch psilocybin mushrooms, but people will show them to me, they'll ask me. I'm really happy to say about 8 out of 10 times, the qualities have been the ones left here. Closed veils, drumsticks. The ones on the right is when they're fully expanded. Well, this is a problem. Now, most people don't know is the flesh of a mushroom, when it's young, when you take a section, it'll go from this to this. And the tissue is transformed into gills that produce the spores. The spores are not active. Moreover, they're allergenic. And so I dug up this reference out of my memory banks, and this is testing the allergenic properties of spores. In this case, 50 children, asthmatic children, especially sensitive. And only 14% of them were sensitive to mycelium. 100% of them were sensitive to psilocybe spores. What about the mucosa? What about the microbiome that has all that mucosa as well? So some people had adverse events due to sensitivities, allergic responses, incompatibility with the microbiome. And as the mushrooms get older, mushrooms don't have a good immune system. The mycelium does. but mushrooms as they mature, they're quick to rot. Many people have made the analogy as quick to rot as fish, so they're very quickly soured by bacteria. So if they're not quickly dried, but when they sporulate, they very, very quick to decompose. Prior to sporulation, you get an extra few more days. So a huge concern that people should be aware of here is that the quality of the fruit body determines not only the receptivity and the idiosyncratic reaction of the individuals, but minimizes then not only adverse effects due to bacteria and contamination, but there is a plummeting in the amount of psilocybin as the mushrooms mature from the drumstick stage to the mature stage, where there's more gills than spores. So this is really important. An unfortunate press release just came out by a company. They were really excited about, they grew their first crop of cubensis, and I put my head in my hands going, oh no. This is an example of people not understanding the process well enough. So this is really important that you have a high quality product. When they're young like this, they tend not to be contaminated with molds and bacteria. And the psilocybin content is at its peak. They're not as perishable, and you have a more consistent product. So there is a path to botanical drug development. It's arduous. A few drugs have been approved, made from botanical products, which in this case, the FDA is also screwed up in their concept of the kingdoms of fungi being in the plants being separate, but nevertheless, it's in this category. So there is a pathway, albeit admittedly arduous because of standardization issues. We are pursuing this. We're looking to work with the FDA in the United States, specifically for producing a CGMP grade psilocybin product for microdosing and or for therapeutic use. So this is my synopsis of people medicine versus profit medicine, but there are future targets. Well, we know that, the psilocybin mushrooms can increase memory, cognitive intelligence, coordination, visual acuity, hearing, and immunity. Well, immunity, that's interesting. So we're looking at Alzheimer's and dementia. We have the app now for ocular disease, auditory enhancement. And then we're looking at, well, can we improve immunity? And so this is, I think, the big quantum leap. Not only is there a widespread revolution around the world from the mycelial underground and making these medicines available to fight anxiety and depression, but depression affects your immune system, and it's bidirectional. So many studies have shown that people that are immunologically compromised, they also are depressed. When you're depressed, less creative. When you're less creative, you're more depressed, and your immune system also remains depressed. So the idea of even the placebo effect has been well documented. What about the effect on neurogenesis of people who are depressed, who can come out of that depression with a more optimistic view of the world, and they are at a better state of immune readiness to be able to let the conventional medicines work better. So if you accept that, then microdosing with psilocybin improves depression, immunity improves with improved mood, microdosing could improve immunity. I think this is it's the part of the mind-body connection that Dr. Andrew Weil has spoken about for about 40, 50 years. And I think has a lot of credibility in this day and age. So two websites, again, non-branded. This is the mushroomreferences.com. I populate this once a month. There's hundreds and hundreds of references. All of the lion's mane clinical studies are up there. The psilocybin studies that I've been able to find. So we populate this specifically for physicians. Then my personal website is paulstamets.com. So with that, I will glad to take some questions, and thank you very much.
Extremely informative as always. And we do have some questions. Can you hear me, Paul? Are you available to answer some questions?
Yeah,
cool. Okay.
I can hear you, but I can't see any questions. So
no, I have to
just read them to me, please.
I have to read them to you. Yeah. So here's one from Tom Hatzis. You mentioned that psilocybes grow by paths. I hunt Psilocybe azurescens on the Oregon coast, and I always go deep into the tall grasses for them. Should I be looking closer to the footpaths?
Yes. Well, think about, I mean, that person brings up a really, really good circumstantial sort of habitat question. The psilocybin mushrooms, when people pick them, you know, I always thought, you know, fairy dust, the idea of fairy rings in England and fairy dust. Well, much of this folkloric, you know, stories that we have are rooted in fact. This is really true with indigenous peoples. Now we know lightning strikes do bring up mushrooms. Well, I think fairy dust may be a metaphor for people picking psilocybin mushrooms, and as you carry them, you walk a trail, and a spore trail literally follows behind you. So the spores are more concentrated by people who are picking them. They're walking on trails, and that is their main transits. And so more psilocybin spores and colonies will occur along trails. Now, the other point that he brings up, though, is this is where the Columbia River goes into the Pacific Ocean. And there's just a small, 10 miles up and down the coast. And this is where the massive amount of logs and trees come down, and it's windy, and this collision of, you know, the ocean to the continents and the Columbia River. This is really a environment that's going through massive amounts of changes constantly. And these mushrooms, edge runners, on the intersection of habitats. And so I think that, you know, you can find them off trail, no doubt about it. The only reason why you may not find them so much along the trails is other people may have picked them before you got there, and so they picked them. But I see them much, and we know this, us mushroom hunters in the Northwest, we just know that we find a lot more mushrooms within 10 feet of the trail than we will 50 feet deep into the forest. And so it's convenient. The mushrooms, in a sense, want to be discovered. So
yeah, good to know.
Next question.
Yeah, sure. This is from Audrey Nightlinger to everyone, to us. How do you ease into niacin? My first time I flushed and got so itchy it scared me.
Well, Dr. Pamsko, who's my associate here, and we're doing lots of research together, she's also like that. So she thinks 25 milligrams is better than 100 milligrams. But if you put it in powdered form, like a smoothie or a glass of water, and you drink it, you absorb it very quickly. If you're taking a tablet, less so in a capsule, it's slower to absorb. So the absorption, the speed of absorption also has an impact. So some people, yes, and I'm glad that people get a flush at 100 milligrams. It's just my proof of point that if you 10 times that much, it's an adversant. It's the antabuse to trying to take psilocybin mushrooms. My purpose here is to get the greatest, broadest benefit to the universality of use. Who doesn't want to be happier? Who doesn't want to be smarter? You know, we need to get this out to the commons in an affordable way. And, dilution is a solution to profitability. So if you can dilute the product and still have the impact against depression, against Alzheimer's, we need smarter people. You know, this is a way of preserving the body intellect of our society and reducing crime. And there's many meta studies that many of you see in my other talks. Zach Walsh in particular is one of the co-authors of this, look at meta studies where the use of psilocybin mushrooms just once in your lifetime is statistically associated with reduction of crime, partner or violence, pro-environmental attitudes, and anti-authoritarianism. So I think these are all good things for helping create a healthier society that's more economically sustainable, because you don't divert all these funds for fighting criminals that otherwise wouldn't be criminals had they dosed once in their lifetime with psilocybin.
Well, you got a lot of mileage out of that question. Here's Grace Sacco. She has two questions. Perhaps we can squeeze them both in here, and you can remember the second one, or the first one when I read the second one. So the first one is there any recommendation for a certain diet while microdosing? And she also wants to know how microdosing might interact with taking mushrooms for journeys purposes. I guess she's asking, is there some kind of tolerance effect or something like that?
That is an excellent question. It's the first time I've ever been asked that. And I would say absolutely yes. If you're doing the Fadiman protocol where you're interrupting it for 3 or 4 days and then taking a microdose, probably not much of an effect. If you're following a protocol that I'm suggesting, 3 to 4 days on, I would think absolutely you would develop a tolerance. You'd be less sensitive for a heroic or a spiritual dose compared to a microdose. Now, in terms of diet, the Aztecs got this right. Psilocybin mushrooms and chocolate go really well together. There's something happening there. Perhaps Dennis could speak to this a lot more authoritatively than I can. But there's a question about fasting before the journeys and things like that. I will eat breakfast. I'll have something very light, maybe at noon, and then if I like to journey, at sunset. I like to see the transition of night to day. I like the stars to come out. I like that idea. I like to be at that interface between day and night. And this also speaks to the metaphors that I've already mentioned. So I think a fasting period of 6 hours or so prior to taking your journey is probably what I subscribe to. Other people have different opinions on this, but definitely not eating a large dinner then taking mushrooms. So that's definitely not conducive to because there is as your receptors, so many of your neuroreceptors are in your gut, and there is a period at about 15 to 20 minutes in for most people where you feel queasy, you feel nauseous. If you got a lot of food in your stomach and you feel that nausea, then you might purge, which some people enjoy, but I personally don't.
Well, we still have a few questions here, which is pretty cool. This Jim Young wonders, how far south do psilocybin mushrooms extend from the Pacific Northwest?
Well, we know they go, well, it depends on naturalized or cultivated. If you're talking about naturalized, they go all the way down to Santa Cruz, pretty much. Rarely have I ever heard from Santa Barbara. There's always some outliers, generally speaking. So in terms of people getting them to grow in their backyard, depending on the species that you want to cultivate, they can be naturalized in wood chips in your backyard. Much wide range of environments. Obviously, the upper end temperatures are detrimental. You want shade. So there's lots of other factors that are involved, but classically, they pretty much limit themselves around Santa Cruz. Big Sur, Santa Cruz is kind of the margin. And then they fewer and fewer populations as outliers as you go down the coast.
Okay, I think we'll have 2 more here, if you have the time, Paul. This is from Shana Melnishin. Excuse me. She says, is there any problem with taking a microdose where you feel slightly elevated after taking it? I know you spoke to this a little bit earlier, Paul, but she says, how important is it for a microdose to be entirely subsensory?
Elevated from the experience. You're feeling the effects of a microdose. So the person's wondering how important it is that you don't feel it. Well, upon the subsequent days, you're likely not to feel anything. We're in new territory here, folks. So when I don't know, I want to tell you I don't know. I really don't know. This is why we need good science, good clinical data, good controls. We need to disambiguate all these confounders so we can standardize things with a high degree of predictability. But just looking at the receptivity and the microbiomes of individuals being so different, there's a lot of, there always will be people outside the bell curve that are going to be hypersensitive or hyper insensitive to the inputs.
Thank you. Excuse me. So one more. This is from Lori Snyder. She says, hi, Paul. My TCM doc says that the mushrooms are hard on the liver. In my few times taking the mushrooms, my skin totally I think she said died out here, but I think she meant dried out, and became very itchy. Any thoughts? P.S. I'm going through my menopause.
And there's Lori in the background on the Zoom wall behind Stephen waving. You can see her back
Okay.
there.
Yeah. Got that, Paul?
I'm not a medical doctor. I can't give medical advice. I can't diagnose medical issues. I stay within my wheelhouse of expertise. I do not know of the deleterious impact of psilocybin mushrooms on liver function. It'd be best to ask a physician that question.
There. So, Paul, thank you so much for your generosity of spirit and sharing all this information and your time with us. I know how busy you are. I know how many projects you have going in your life. By the way, Paul is also the author of 6 remarkable books, including he's the editor and author of the book Fantastic Fungi or Fungi. And the film, if you haven't seen it by the same name, Fantastic Fungi is a remarkable documentary. It truly is, folks. So you must mushrooms, including things like the woman that Paul showed in that little video where they have people who have been, end-of-life people and so on. So again, thanks so much for your time, Paul. Really, I'm honored and grateful to have had you with us.
Great. I'm so thankful to everybody. Thanks to Brother Dennis and Chioma. I look forward to hearing your presentation. I've been watching you in the green room, so I know you're ready.
Wonderful. And before
Thank
that,
you, Paul.
Mark has a quick comment or two here.
Oh, I just wanted to say thank you so much, Paul. It's always a pleasure working with you and having you share your wisdom in terms of, your wheelhouse of expertise. So thank you for bringing that to the conference and just the work that you do. And I want to say, Stephen, thank you for a shout out on all of Paul's books because, of course, Banyan Books is our sponsor.
Good segue, huh?
Pardon me?
Good segue.
Yeah, it was perfect. It's just like we're getting good at this. But there's some books that, support Banyan Books. They've got a collection of Paul Stamets' works, and we just want to say support your local small businesses. We really thank Banyan Books for the work they do.